Selamat pagi. That means good morning in Bahasa Indonesia. Today we're going to watch a video on 9.1, Points on a Coordinate Plane, Part 1. In order to follow along with this video, you will need some graph paper. You can either open Notability and you can take notes by using the graph paper that's in Notability, or you can find some graph paper around the house. It's going to be really important that somehow you find some graph paper to take some notes on today. All right, let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about coordinate planes. The picture that you see here, this is a coordinate plane. A coordinate plane has an x-axis and it has a y-axis. In elementary school, you guys mostly worked with things that were in what we call the first quadrant. This right here is the first quadrant because it contains all of the positive numbers of a coordinate plane. So you guys are used to seeing things that are plotted in this quadrant. Today we're going to be talking not only about first quadrant, but also we're going to be talking about quadrants 2, 3, and 4. So this is going to be quadrant number 1 right here. Quadrant number 2 is going to be right over here. Quadrant 3 is here, and quadrant 4 is here. That's something that's going to be really, really important for you to memorize. So you should memorize that the first quadrant is always the one in the upper right corner. And then you should memorize that to get quadrant 2, 3, and 4, you kind of go to the left and down in a counterclockwise rotation to get quadrants 2, 3, and 4. So if I give you a random point on the graph like this, and I say, hey, what quadrant is that point in? You should be able to say, oh, that point is in quadrant number 4. So we want to memorize the numbers for the different quadrants. We also want to memorize which one is the x-axis and which one is the y-axis. And another very important thing for you to know is how to take points and put them onto this coordinate system. For example, let's say we have the point 3, 7. Where would that point go on this picture? In order to find that out, I have to know that all points, every single point, is always going to have the x number come first, and it's always going to have the y number come second. That's another thing to memorize. I know there's a lot of things to memorize. So it always is going to be x first, and it always is going to be y second. It's the same order as the alphabet, x, y, z. So if the x number is 3, which is a positive 3, I'm going to look at my x-axis. Now I don't have any numbers labeled on it yet. I can do that though. This point right here is called the origin, and that's going to be 0, 0. This is going to be positive number 1, number 2, number 3, just like a number line, number 4, 5, 6. So I'm just making all my positive numbers here, and I could keep going. And then on the other side in the x-axis, that's going to be all the negatives. You're going to want to start with -1, just like if it was a number line, and then -2, -3, -4, and so on. And then I could also label the numbers in the y-axis. The ones in the top half of the y-axis are going to be all of my positive numbers. So this is going to be +1, +2, +3, +4, and so on. And then I could also label my negative numbers on the y-axis going down the bottom. So this would be a -1, -2, -3, -4, and so on. So if I'm trying to put this point here, the 3, 7, if I'm trying to put that point somewhere on this graph, and I know that the 3 is going to be the x, and I know that the 7 is going to be the y, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the 3 on the x, which is right here, and I'm going to go to the 7 on the y, which is right here, and I'm going to put the point right here. If I had an imaginary line where the 7 is, this is where that line would be. And if I had an imaginary line where the 3 is, that's where this line would be. Notice this point is right where those two lines are intersecting. I could also think about it this way. First, I'm going to go over 3. When I say go over, what I mean is my pencil is starting right here at the origin, and I'm going over 1, 2, 3 this way, and then I'm going up 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I could go over 3, up 7, and that's where I would end up. So if I were trying to plot the point 3, 7, that's where it would go. Let's try another point. Let's try the point 6, 2. If I'm trying to plot this point on the graph, I'm going to first say, well, I know the 6 is my x point, and I know that the 2 is my y point, so I can go over 6 on the x-axis, and it is a positive 6, so I'm going to go in this direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I went over 6. Then I can go up 2 on the y-axis, 1, 2, and my point is going to end up right here. This is the point 6, 2. Which quadrant is this point in? It's in quadrant number 1. Quadrant number 1 is the quadrant that has all the positive numbers in it. So 6, 2 is in quadrant number 1 because they're both positive. The 6 and the 2 are both positive. Are you ready to try an example with negatives? Let's try the point -3, -5. If we're going to graph this point, I know that I have to start with my x. So I have to go on the x-axis and I have to go to the -3. Here it is. Here's the -3 on the x-axis. Then I have to find the -5 on the y-axis. Here it is, -5 on the y-axis. And my point has to be where those two lines would intersect. If I had a line like this, and if I had a line like this, they would intersect right there. So that's where my point is going to be on the graph. Which quadrant is this point in? It's in quadrant number 3. Let's try another example. In this example, I have already put a point on the graph for you, and you have to figure out what the right numbers are for that point. What do you think? This point is in quadrant 2, we can tell. I know that the x has to come first and the y has to come second, always. Which number would be for the x for this yellow point? Remember, this is the x-axis down here. And so the number that's for the x is going to be -7. So x is going to be -7. And what's the y number going to be? +3. -7 and +3. So that's the answer. The answer is that this point is located at -7, 3, and it is in quadrant number 2. Here's one final example for you. Go ahead and take a look at this green point. The green point is in which quadrant? It's in quadrant number 4. And how could I label this green point? What, what? Remember, the x always has to come first and the y always has to come second. What number is for the x? This is the x-axis, and the number is 9. What number's for the y? This is the y-axis, and the number is -2. The answer is 9, -2, and this point is in the 4th quadrant. All right, here's some problems for you to practice on your own. This problem is in page 118 of your book. It might be easiest if you try it in there. Go ahead and pause the video and take a couple minutes to work out the answer for this problem, and then you can look at the video to check your work. All right, these are the answers. Point P is located at 3, 0. Remember, the x is always first and the y is always second. And the 3 is for the x because it's on the x-axis, and then 0 for the y because it didn't change at all on the y-axis. Point Q is at -3, +3. Point R is at -5, +1. Point S is at -6, -4. Point T is at -4, -7. Point U is at 4, -5. And point V is at 3, -2. Point P is actually not inside of a quadrant. Point P is just on the x-axis. So we would just say on the x-axis for that one. Points Q and R are in quadrant number 2. Points S and T are in quadrant number 3. And points V and U are in quadrant number 4. Great work on that problem. I have one more practice problem for you guys to try. This is also in page 118 of your book. Go ahead and pause the video here and you can try this problem. You are going to need some graph paper in order to solve it. This problem wants you to plot the points on a coordinate plane and to tell which quadrant each point is located in. So on a piece of graph paper, you should draw something like this. Try to make it as straight as possible. So you should draw an x-axis, you should draw a y-axis. You can label it with all the numbers that would go on each axis. And then you can put dots where you think all the different points would go. Go ahead and try that, and then you can come watch the video to check your answer. All right, let's talk about the answers. Point A is -4, +3. That's going to be right here. I went over 4 on the x-axis and then up 3 on the y-axis. This is point A. It is in quadrant number 2. Point B is going to be 3, -4. I'm going to go over 3, and then I'm going to go down to the -4. This is point B right here. It's at 3, -4, and it is in the 4th quadrant. Point C is going to be 5, 0. I'm going to remember that the x's come first and the y's come second. So I'm going to find the 5 for the x, and I'm not going to go anywhere since it's 0 for the y. So this is going to be point C right here. Point D is going to be 0, -5. So my y value is going to be -5, and my x value is 0. So this is point D. It's right on the y-axis, so it's not in a quadrant, it's just on the y-axis. Point E is -2, -1. So I'm going to find the -2 for the x's, which is right here. And then I'm going to find the -1 for the y, which is right here. And I'm going to figure out that those points would intersect right there. That's going to be where I put my dot, right there. And then point F is going to be 2, -1, which is going to be right here because I went over 2 and I went down 1. So point F ends up here in quadrant number 4. All right, good job practicing with these coordinates. We have one more thing to talk about today, and that is reflections. If I have a point, let's put it here. This is going to be what point? What, comma, what? Remember, it always has to be x and then y. The x is 4 and the y is 3. So if I have this point here, 4, 3, if I'm going to do a reflection of this point, imagine that the x-axis is going to be a mirror. If the x-axis is a mirror, anything on the top half has to go on the bottom half and it has to be reflected. So this point here, the 4, 3, would have to go right here at 4, -3 if it's being reflected across the x-axis. Notice that there's the same amount of space here as there is here. That will always happen in a reflection. There will always be the same amount of space between the line of reflection and this point as there is between the line of reflection and that point. If I put a point on this graph at right here at -2, -5, what is the point of reflection for this point? Remember, the point of reflection has to be the same distance away from this line this way as it is this way. So the point is 5 units away from the line of reflection. So the point of reflection is going to have to be -2, +5. That is the point of reflection for -2, -5. I have a few problems for you to try about the point of reflection. Go ahead and pause the video to give yourself an opportunity to try these problems right here. These are 4 different problems, and the question is, what is the point of reflection for each of these 4 different points here? All right, here's the answers. The first point, -6, 2, that's going to be right here. We are reflecting all of these points about the x-axis. So I'm going to draw a green line right here. That's the line of reflection. So this point has to be the same distance here as it is here. So the point of reflection is going to be -6, -2. That's the answer for the first one. The second point is at -2, -4, which is right there. And so the point of reflection is going to be right here at -2, +4. That's the answer for the second one. The third point is at 4, 5, which is right there. The point of reflection has to be the same distance from here to here as it is from here to here. So my point of reflection is going to be 4, -5. And my last point is at 7, -3, which is right here, which means the point of reflection is going to be 7, +3, which is right there. All right, guys, that's it for today. Great job with this video. Make sure that you can submit your notes onto Canvas, and after that, you are done. Have a wonderful rest of your day.